You know, I haven't done a whole lot of classic album reviews. Mainly whenever I'm doing a classic album review, it's on like a masterpiece theater, but I want to dive into some of those albums that are really important to me that aren't necessarily masterpieces, but those that I can't help but love. What better way to start this all off than an album that I had been listening to pretty much daily a couple weeks back, so let's dive into it. The Myths and Legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table by Rick Wakeman. So Rick Wakeman is a pretty well-known keyboardist within the progressive rock community. He really hit the stage hard back in the early 70s. He was originally with the Strawbs, then he went over to Yes, and within his own solo work, he has just had a plethora. He is well known for his technical chops, his prowessness within the noodling away on the keyboards there, and also his capes. I'm not gonna lie, his capes are a pretty big deal. Put a face to that pretentious aspect of progressive rock, creating like huge soundscapes over giant concepts. Each one of his albums are in one way, shape, or form are a concept. So now we're looking at his second full-length studio solo album of King Arthur. I'm just going to call it King Arthur because holy jeez, that's a long title. Before I even jump into this, he really, as I said, put the name of the pretentious progressive rock styles. I mean, when he first toured with this album, he wanted to have a full like orchestra behind him with half the stage being a skating rink, and it's one of the biggest flops in musical history. But how can you compete when the actual end result was something like this? Okay, yeah, maybe that wasn't such a great move. Let's take a look at the actual music that's found on this. Being his second album, the first one was a purely instrumental one, so this is the first time that we actually have lyrics and words on this, following the concept of King Arthur and the Knights of his Round Table. Like, Rick Wakeman is the main focus point on here, being all the keyboards, synth, grand piano, and being the main producer, but we have a full-length, like almost symphony backing him up, with Ashley Holtz and Gary Pickford being the main vocalists. We do have Jeffrey Crampton being the main guitarist, and then Roger Newell as being on the bass, and Barney James being on drums. And then from there, we just have kind of the orchestra following suit. All feels very medieval in that sense. We do even have like monks' chants. Starting off and leading Lady of the Lake, as well as Merlin and Sir Galahad, and leading us within the last battle there. And I like how the themes of the music do come again and again. We found the themes within Guinevere, we found it within Merlin the Magician, and we found it again with Sir Galahad in the last battle. And I like how each time the theme is changed just slightly to show us that there's things that are happening within the narrative story. I like also how each of the main character that the piece is portraying does feel very similar to that character that it's portraying. So with King Arthur, or the title track of Arthur, it starts off very humble, it starts off very somber, but then it just kind of explodes. So, you know, it starts off with that, he who pulleth out the sword from the stone and anvil is the rightful king of all Britain. And it starts off with that big crescendo of sound, kind of that horn section, that it does feel very pretentious in that sense of being like, look how amazing this is, ha ha. And then from there, it does start to like mellow out a little bit, but we do have, you know, Rick coming in with that keyboards of that again, setting the stage, making it feel very epic and very like large in scope to kind of usher us forth. But then once we actually get into King Arthur itself, it's just kind of very mellow. We have that little bit of piano crescendos going on, and arpeggios kind of leading us through within that track, and it does ebb and flow, right? So we have Arthur the individual, and then we also have Arthur the myth. and both are balanced very well within the musical landscape of that. I think the singing styles of Gary Pitford really shows the intimate aspect of it. Like when he's put on the stage and is singing away, it really feels like I'm getting to know Arthur the person and like the responsibilities that the man carries. Lady of the Lake being that monk chant, kind of bringing us down, kind of reintroducing some more of the themes, like grounding it in the time of when this would have taken place and that kind of musical styling being the main music there. Guinevere is much more feminine in that sense. This is where we have Ashley Holt coming in within the vocal work. I love that kind of dance that we have within Lady Guinevere. Much more real in that sense. Again, we're getting a clearer picture of Guinevere in that sense. In the love sequence. This is more of like a love ballad without being like a full-on love ballad. And then when we come into Sir Lancelot and the Black Knight, this is where we have one of those big fights. And it's not quite to the extent of like the last battle, but we do have that, you know, Sir Lancelot coming through. Merlin the Magician is probably my favorite track on this. And this is one of my favorite tracks. Just, I gotta call out the bass player. I love Roger Newell? Bass play, where it just, like, at first I thought it was Chris Squire because it has that crisp feel to it. Building up, we've got that bow, 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 bow. It's just so tangible, like I can reach into the song and grab the notes because it's just so right there. And then over top of that, we do have Rick's playing style where it's just kind of all over the place. That main highlight for me is when we come into that ragtime kind of a feel, that fun, kooky aspect. It almost reminds me of like the Disney Merlin from The Sword and the Stone, where it's that kind of bumbling, fun, magician style. And I like that that's kind of placed on here, because a lot of this is very epic in scale, and I like that it brings it down within this kind of like ragtime feel. And then the album rounds itself off with Sir Galahad and the Last Battle, and Sir Galahad might be one of the lower points on this album for me. Like, I never really feel all that invested into it, and it is probably because combined the two tracks are probably just over 14 minutes. And because of that, there's a lot of music to kind of get through and to sit through, and because the two songs kind of, you know, converge into one another, I don't really know where it really splits. And the Last Battle is so epic and rounding everything off. I love how it builds and then like plateaus for a while and lets you sit there and then dives back into the track overall. So overall, I love this album. This is one of my favorites. This is probably my favorite Rick Wakeman album. I do see that there are a few flaws within it. It is very pretentious at times, but I love sitting down and just getting myself enveloped in the music. Even after all these years, I can still find myself craving it, and I'll listen to it once a day for a good week and never get bored of it. It does drag at a few points, especially within Sir Galahad and Sir Lancelot and the Black Knight, so it's not a perfect album, but I believe it's also the closest that Rick Wakeman ever came as a solo artist to reaching that perfection that he's always been trying to reach. And so in that case, I have to give it that I love it with my whole heart. It's the standard album that I will rate albums for within this type of a rating. A solid album, one that I cannot recommend more for those classic prog albums, especially at a time in 1975 when prog was starting to be looked down on for being pretentious. And I have a feeling this album, especially within the touring, might be part of the cause for that. So that's about it for Rick Wakeman's Myths and Legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How does it compare to his past works? Let me know of that by commenting down below. Also, let me know of some other albums that you want me to review within the classic prog scheme. I'll be doing a deep dive of some of the other ones that I'll listen to. I find myself being rejuvenated and really pumped after I listen to a lot of these tracks. Like, these are the albums that really helped shape my musical tastes. So let me know of some of those as well by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.